I'm in a very peculiar business, folks. Oh, not the magic stuff. No, I levitate the ladies in the air, and I saw them in several pieces. Incidentally, it's my fervent wish that someday a lady magician will saw a gentleman in several pieces, and perhaps forget to put them back together again in some cases. But I do that sort of thing. I appear on stages around the world as a conjurer. Now, the American term for it is magician. It's not a good expression because if you look in the dictionary, the strict definition of magician is one who uses magic. And magic, the definition I prefer from a leading dictionary, is the attempt to control nature by means of spells and incantations. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in my time, as you might have guessed, I have tried spells and incantations. No good. You can spell and incant all you want. The lady will still be on the couch waiting patiently to float into the air and will be imprisoned in the box and the saw blade descending upon her unprotected midriff and in some danger of being severely scratched, if not worse. Spells and incantations don't work. You have to use skullduggery. And let me make it very clear what the magical trade, the conjuring trade, is more correct as conjuring, is the approximation of the effect of a true magician using means of subterfuge and trickery. The magician, if you will, in the American usage, is an actor playing the part of a wizard. We are entertainers. I don't think that there are many folks, but there are some out there, by David Copperfield's own admission to me, who still believe that really he can do the things that he purports to do. Now, after magical performance, we've all undergone the same experience, all of us in the trade. You get people coming to you afterwards and saying, I really enjoyed what you did. Thank you so much for coming. And you say, well, it's great to be here. I'm happy that you were pleased with it. And then they buttonhole you and say, but you know what, the business with the, you know, with the bottles there that multiplied and everything like that, obviously that's a trick. And the one where you you did the thing with the rings and the ropes and so that's, obviously that's a trick. But the one where you told the lady what word she'd chosen out of the newspaper, that of course can't be a trick. I say, yes, that's a trick too, but it's disguised as a miracle of a semi-religious nature. And they wink at you and they say, sure. And they walk away and they tell their friends afterwards, well, he won't admit it, but we all know. There is a hunger, a very strong hunger with us all. I'm not just saying audiences that watch the magician, no, with us all. We'd like to have a certain amount of fantasy in our lives be true, but it's a very dangerous sort of a temptation to immediately assume that it must be magic or supernatural or occult or paranormal if we don't have an explanation for it. Now, I can tell you that in my life, I spent a great deal of my life investigating and observing and carefully noting and making use of psychology. I'm not a psychologist, not by any means. I have no academic credentials whatsoever, so I come to you today absolutely unencumbered by any responsibilities of that nature. There is no dean who will call me on the carpet tomorrow morning and say, you shouldn't have said that. You see, I'm in the business of giving opinions from an uninformed point of view, except from the point of view of a skeptical person who knows how people's minds work and often don't work. It was mentioned previously that, if everyone in a certain number of years, the scientists will consist of every human being on Earth and all the animals, the donkeys, the burros, the whole thing. And my friend David Alexander here remarked to me in a cruel aside that even today, certain parts of certain horses have become scientists. And that is quite true. I have met many of them, and though they have PhDs, you'd hardly know it. I've just come back from, I won't mention where, it's a project that's ongoing at the moment, and I have seen that principle at work. And I must share with you another thing, while in passing. I have a theory. This is only a theory, folks, unproven, but observations so far tend to support its possible validity. With my advance apologies to PhDs in the room, I have a theory about PhDs and the granting of the degree itself. I'm only outside the field, not an academic, so I observe As a curious observer, I have many times seen films of, and on a couple of occasions actually attended, ceremonies where PhDs are created. They are created, you know. The PhD itself is earned, but then the person who has passed all of the tests and done all of the right things in the right way and has been approved doesn't become a PhD until one significant moment in history where a roll of paper, usually with a red or a blue ribbon around, is pressed into his or her hand. At that moment, that person becomes a very special class of being known as PhD in various disciplines. Now, I have noted at those ceremonies, and perhaps you have noted it as well and wondered about it yourself, that the man who gives out those rolls of paper wears gloves. Why? A question I frequently ask, why would he want to wear gloves? Is the paper dirty? I don't think so. Is there something about that roll of paper, or perhaps the ribbon, that he doesn't want to contaminate? He doesn't want it to touch his skin. I'm going to postulate to you just an idea, that perhaps there is a secret chemical which has been carefully genetically engineered, which is on the surface of that paper, so that when the PhD, up until that moment not a PhD, you see, receives that roll of paper, this chemical is absorbed by the skin and goes into the bloodstream and is conducted directly to the brain. This is a very carefully engineered chemical which goes directly, please don't laugh, this is science, goes directly to the speech center of the brain and paralyzes the brain in such a way that 2 sentences from then on in any given language are no longer possible to be pronounced by that person. Those 2 sentences are, I don't know, and I was wrong. I honestly don't know about that. However, my observations of the situation are that I've never heard any PhD utter either one of those sentences. I've never heard them say, I'd like to marry a lobster either, but that doesn't mean they can't say it. But those 2 sentences never seem to pass their lips. And of course, I'm being exceedingly facetious. I have, believe me, and I mean this now sincerely, every respect not only for science, but for those who pursue the various disciplines of science. It takes a great deal of courage, application, study, sacrifice, and in many cases, some outrageous attacks upon your integrity and your ability in order to maintain a point of view in science which may or may not be popular. I have been with many prominent scientists who have, from time to time, had to stick their professional necks out, their academic necks out, and sometimes their necks get pretty badly beat up in the process. It's not an easy thing, certainly, to speak against what is generally accepted. Well, then what is generally accepted? I'm afraid, due to the media impact on our civilization, that a great number of things are easily accepted because they are repeated so often. They are repeated endlessly to the public, and don't think that it won't get through to the academic community as well. Any number of times I have spoken to scientists who, when I ask them a critical question about some belief in some sort of parapsychological, supernatural, or occult claim, has said, I really don't know. You know, I hear a good deal about it, and Professor so-and-so, whatever, did make a statement on this, that, and the other thing. Now, I am often asked by reporters about opinions by Professor or Dr. so-and-so, and my response is almost always like this. I say, if I were an academic, my answer to you would have to be, perhaps Professor Brontosaurus, based upon the small amount of data that he has presently gathered compared to what should be gathered in order to establish a satisfactory statistical picture and an amount of data upon which conclusions could be drawn by one of the various statistical pictures available to him, has come upon conclusions which prematurely expressed on further examination. I'll go on and on forever if you wish. That's the academic's reply. When they ask me, I simply say, in my layman's, non-academic opinion, I think that Professor Brontosaurus is not rowing with both oars in the water. Now that's simple, and it's direct, and it is an honest expression of my opinion. I am presently faced with a situation, again unnamed, where I am going to have to show a number of dedicated, honest, hard-working people that they have made a colossal error of judgment. I have to do this, and I have to do it in a resounding manner, simply because to not do so could result, and I'm sorry I can't tell you any more than this, but you will find out about it eventually, I think within the next year or so. To not do it would cause a great deal of personal damage, grief, and considerable heartbreak and discomfort to a great number of people who are already laboring under certain disadvantages and certain burdens that they didn't bring upon themselves at all. I hate to be so mysterious about it, but it's an ongoing piece of investigation. I'm not often involved in that serious a situation. Usually my situation is somewhat different. I'm looking into an astrologer's claims, or I'm looking into some sort of a pseudoscientific thing, pretty well obviously pseudoscientific thing. But I always have to remember an experience that occurred to me. We all have the easy answer of, well, I guess that's a ghost, or it must be paranormal. It could be poltergeist, and we walk away from it because we can't or won't look a little further into it. Some years ago, when I lived in New Jersey, well, my house, I must tell you, first of all, is a strange sort of a place. It's sort of a wayside stop for itinerant magicians, conjurers, mountebanks, various characters of ill repute who will come by, identify themselves to me, and there's always a spare bedroom or a sleeping bag available to someone or other. And I often walk in, I see people there I've never seen before in my life, and pretty soon I get to think that I don't want to see them again, either because they drink up all my beer and never contribute. I came home after a couple of days away by car. I was very, very tired, and I came in on a weekend. It's a Saturday night, and my foster son Alexis was in the kitchen, and he was helping a couple of magicians drink up the beer. And I walked in and I said, guys, I'm very, very tired. I'm going to bed. I'll see you in the morning. And they said, fine. And I guess they carried on until late at night. I went in, fell asleep, woke up the next morning, came staggering into the kitchen in time to see them eating up more of my groceries in the form of breakfast at this time. Sat down, got a half a cup of coffee into me, and straightened up at the table. And Alexis looked at me, my foster son. He said, what's with you? And I said, wow, I think last night I might have actually had a classic example of the OOBE. That's the out-of-body experience. You see, when scientists or parapsychologists even are able to express something in 2 or 3 words, or a word with 3 or 4 syllables in it, it immediately becomes scientific. So they call this out-of-body experience. It's hyphenated, and it sounds pretty good. OOBE. It means that you somehow find yourself out of your body and looking down on it, or from a distance, or whatever. And Alexis looked at me and he said, sure, you? And I said, hey, got to be honest, it appears to me as if I did undergo such an experience. Okay, give us a description. And the 2 magicians at the table leaned closer over their bacon and eggs and wanted to hear what I had to say. I said, well, I remember waking up in the middle of the night. I remember last night I couldn't get to sleep. I was super tired, but then, of course, as soon as you hit the mattress, you're staring at the ceiling. And that happened to me. So I turned on the television receiver, and it had some program or other on it. And it went on and on and on, and I guess I fell asleep. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night, and I felt that I was in a position like this, spread-eagled against the ceiling of my bedroom. And I'm looking down at this bed, rather large bed. I thrash around a lot at night. And Alice, who was my black cat at that time, of course, was curled up in the middle of the bed, so that I had to be way over at one side, and I was way over at one side, trying not to disturb the cat. Of course, you wouldn't dare do that. She's taken the exact center of the bed, curled up in a big black ball, and as I'm up against the ceiling, I notice that the room is lit in sort of a grayish light. Look down at the television set, it's psh, and there's static all over the screen. You know, the white noise sort of thing, and confetti on the screen, and that's illuminating the room. And I'm seeing myself in bed, scrunched over at one side, and this big chartreuse sort of a green bedspread on it with Alice, the black cat, in the middle of it. And I noted that as she opened up her eyes, she had green eyes the same color as the bedspread. It almost looked like 2 holes punched right through her head. And she looked at me, and as cats do, she went, and went right back to sleep. Now, that was a very strong experience for me, folks. And I could tell you right now at this moment, yes, I really believe, I'm not convinced of it, but I believe from the evidence that's presented to me, I had an out-of-body experience that matches the description that we've all heard about so many times. But fortunately for me, in a way, I'm not really dead set against having my belief structure disturbed or having new facts come in that will disturb my previous convictions in matters. That doesn't really disturb me that much. But fortunately for you, so that I can give you this anecdotal experience, which I think is very powerful, and fortunately for me, I am able to tell you what actually had happened. Alexis looked at me and he said, I got two things to show you. He went to the foot of the stairs and came up with a big transparent laundry bag. He had taken it halfway down. He never took it all the way down to the laundry room. He took it halfway down. That's the way kids do. And he brought it all the way upstairs. And inside, I noted a bunch of sheets, pillowcases, and the Chartres bedspread. He said, that's been there since yesterday. Then I don't have the Chartres bedspread on my bed. I dashed to the door, looked in, and it was this, oh God. I lost it someplace, thank goodness. It is a terrible hunting scene. I don't know where I got it. Somebody left it, I don't know. But it was the only one that I used when the other one was in the laundry. He had taken that one off, put it in the laundry, and the other one was on there. So I couldn't have seen Alice in the middle of the hunting scene. I would have noticed that. And he said, look out on the patio. I looked outside. He said, Harry here, one of the magicians, is highly allergic to cats. I put her out yesterday around 4 in the afternoon. She hasn't been in the house since, and she's not very happy about it all. And I looked out, and there she was on the patio and had been out all night. She could not have been in the bedroom, curled up in the middle. It was a dream, an hallucination, if you will. It could not have happened. Physically, I had two very good pieces of evidence that it could not have happened. Now, that's important, folks, in that if I did not have either one or both of those pieces of evidence, I would now have to say to you, to the best of my knowledge, I had an out-of-body experience. But all the other out-of-body experiences we hear of, we have to wonder now. Those folks are not quite as skeptical about the subject as I am in most cases. If they don't have some convincing evidence to the contrary, what's to stop them from saying, I'm absolutely certain I've had an out-of-body experience, because there is no other explanation for it except the possible and rather parsimonious conclusion that they were either dreaming or had some sort of an hallucination, whatever. It might have been a bad pork chop for all we know. Now, I ask you to consider that carefully, and please don't forget it, because it is a good example of how even the arch skeptic, could possibly have been taken in. I have been through a number of small experiences like that in my life, some déjà vus. I love the line from the fellow who says, I keep having the same déjà vu over and over and over again. It was Yogi Berra who said it's déjà vu all over again, but the one who says, I keep on having it all over. Yes, that's a déjà vu, I think. I'm not too sure. I have had experiences like that, but I have resisted the temptation to merely say, well, at last I've got proof of it. I'm highly skeptical, sure. But what is that skepticism based on? If you're skeptical as well, have you asked yourself, upon what do I base my skepticism? Are you just plain ornery? You just don't want to go along with the rest of the thing? Do you know some other people who believe in it that are really pretty dense and you don't want to join their group? You've got to have a reason, I think, for yourself and for others as to why you are skeptical. These things are not likely to be true. Therefore, you need proof of them. Now, you're not required, or am I certainly required, to prove a negative. I can't do that. I can't prove telepathy doesn't exist. I remember getting a question years ago. A lady stood up in the aisle and said, can you prove to me that ESP doesn't exist? And I said, no, I can't, ma'am. She sat down, with her arms folded. That was a victory for her. And then I went on to explain, I can't prove a negative. My question is, do you believe in it? She says, absolutely. I said, can you prove that it is so? She said, well, I'm quite convinced of it. That's not my question. Can you prove that it ain't so, or that it is so? Not that you can't prove that it ain't so. Can you prove that it is so? You're the one making the claim. And they are the folks making the claims. We're not. We skeptics, as Michael Shermer clearly pointed out, we're not in the business of debunking. If I were in the business of debunking, and I've often had that label pinned on me, and I've always resented it, and I've denied it, If I were in the business of debunking, it means I go into an investigation convinced that this ain't so, and I'm going to show you that it isn't. I'm not a lawyer. I don't have an advocacy position to take. I'm convinced this isn't so. I don't care what the evidence is. I'm somehow going to prove that it ain't so. No. I go into the thing investigating. Now, to be perfectly fair with you, let's be real for a minute. Well, all the way through this, I hope. I can't prove a negative, it's true. But I go into this thing, I say, prepared to be shown. Am I prejudiced against it? Oh, yes. I have to admit that. After all, if you've been sitting by a chimney for 63 years on the evening of December the 24th, and a fat man in a red suit has never bounced down the chimney, all you can say is 100% of my evidence shows me that this is not necessarily so. I don't have any proof that it is. And what's more important, folks, is this one fact: it's not very likely to be true based upon what you already know. Now, I often end my lectures with this little illustration. People will ask the question endlessly. Can you show that it ain't so? No. Then I got you. No. You have to prove to me, since you say it is so, that it is so. Suppose I illustrate for you, I think rather well, but you'll be the judge of that in a moment, whether or not you can prove a negative. Let's take Santa Claus. That's a very good example. Well, around the end of December, I'm awfully popular, I must admit, in the street, and I have kids almost worshiping me. I'm sorry if they're disillusioned later on, but who knows? Wasn't my fault. I didn't tell them the myth in the first place. You have to examine the Santa Claus thing by specific means. Now, there's one way you can go around and measure chimneys. But that's not much of a, he does come in the back door, I'm told, occasionally, if the chimney's occupied. Or it's too small. So that's not much of a way of investigating it. Flying reindeer, there's a good way. Hey, that we can test. Oh, please, don't tell the ASPCA about this. I don't really want to do the experiment. I must say that in advance. I really don't want to do the experiment, but let's just walk through it as if I were doing the thing. Okay, let's name some numbers now. Okay, select by some randomizing process, 1,000 reindeer, okay? And you get them all together in a reindeer truck or something. I don't know what you put a reindeer in, and a whole bunch of people with whips or, I don't know, what do you do with reindeer? But anyway, get some people who know how to handle reindeer and stick them up on top of the World Trade Center in New York. You're laughing and you're making assumptions now. I can't have that. You're going to test whether or not reindeer can fly, okay? So I'll sort of walk through it with you, if you'll bear with me. You have a guy there where that's a dirty laugh, lady. I want to tell you, but I like it. Keep it up. You go on the top of the the World Trade Center, and you have your 1,000 reindeer there. I put numbers on the side, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 1,000. Big numbers so you can see them. And you have a guy with a videotape camera, lots of pads of paper and whatnot, and pens that work. And you say, okay, the time is now 10 past 10 in the morning. Okay, first experiment, number 1, please. And number 1 up to the edge. And ready? Okay, video camera going. Good. Push. Write down no. Really no. Number 2, push. Well, now I don't know what the result of the experiment will be. I suspect strongly what it will be based upon my meager knowledge of the aerodynamics of the average reindeer, though I'm not an expert on it, and based upon previous accounts of what reindeer can and cannot do. I think we are going to end up with a pile of very unhappy and broken reindeer at the foot of the World Trade Center, and probably a couple of policemen standing outside a squad car saying, I don't know, but here comes another one. Now, it gets better. I won't throw any more reindeer, I promise. Now, what have we proven with this experiment? Have we proven that reindeer cannot fly? No, of course not. Think about it now. We've only shown that on this occasion, Under these conditions of atmospheric pressure, temperature, radiation, all this sort of thing, at this position geographically, on the season, etc., that these 1,000 reindeer either could not fly or chose not to. Now, if the second, then we know something certainly about the IQ of the average reindeer in this group. However, we have not proven a negative. We cannot prove a negative, technically and rationally and philosophically speaking. However, people will often look at this example and say, well, how many reindeer would you have to test? Now, I'm not going to get into the statistics of the thing. Art Benjamin can handle that for you. I'm not going to get into the arguments on the matter. I will only tell you that you cannot prove a negative, and I think that's a rather good example of it that you might wish to use in illustrating your point. The other folks who claim that it is so are required to prove it. And if it's so, it's very easy. Just show me one flying reindeer. Of course, then they come up with the rationalizations and they say, oh no, it's only the 8 tiny reindeer that live at the North Pole who can and will, on the evening of December the 24th, fly to do that specific job. In that case, you have to throw up your hands and say, well, I don't think your hypothesis is very testable. And that's another thing, folks, don't spin your wheels. I refuse to spin my wheels. I just came back from Hungary. I was invited there to Budapest by the Academy of Sciences. They are very concerned about the fact that now that many of these countries are freed from the burdensome and very onerous yoke of communism, the freedom has arrived, freedom to receive all kinds of scientific information in the form of journals and lectures and whatnot, but also nonsense comes in as well. The astrologers, the faith healers, the ESP artists, the people with the pendulums, the water dowsers, everybody, they're lined up at the border and pouring across the border because they see a new market. And the scientists of Hungary were concerned about this, and there is a gentleman, a Professor Sven de Gotay, who is a very well-known member of Parliament and a brain scientist, he defines himself as, and very well respected in the field all around the world. And he was one of my sponsors, and he said to me, he said, Mr. Randi, have you seen any of the publicity on the magnetic ladies? I had. In case you're not familiar with the magnetic ladies of Hungary, I will relieve you of that ignorance immediately. You may have seen a picture that made all the wire services in this country last year sometime of a magnetic man from, at that time, Leningrad. There's a picture of a middle-aged gentleman standing like this, naked from the belt up, with a flat iron stuck here, a hammer over here, nails, razor blades, all kinds of metal clinging to his body. The caption in it said that he attracted these things willy-nilly. Things just jumped onto his body, that he was somehow magnetic. Boy, I'll bet his wristwatch is a mess. Can you imagine? And don't bring him near your computers. Boy, he could really be something. I can just imagine going through a steel door and go bam, right into it. I don't like that steel door. I really don't like that steel door. Well, I took that with the proverbial grain of salt, about the size of a basketball. That was appropriate size. And I just sort of put it in the scrapbook, put that in the scrapbook, forget about it. But then he asked me about the magnetic ladies of Hungary, and he said their reputation is such that objects, not necessarily metallic objects even, cling to their body with such tenacity that a strong man cannot tear them loose. Now, wait a minute, folks. Suppose we got some instant glue. This is the worst case scenario. And we take, tennis ball, something. Stick it on the lady's neck at the side. Looks like a huge, ugly tennis hickey. If a strong man can't tear it off, he's going to tear her skin off. Or her head. Who knows? Something's got to give. What's going to happen? He's going to tear a piece of her off if he's not strong enough to tear this thing off. So Sven de Gotay looked at me and he said, Mr. Randi, how can they make claims like this? I said, well, show me the magnetic ladies. He said, tomorrow, after the press conference, they're going to show up. I could hardly wait. Now, they had suggested, that is one of the parapsychologists in Hungary had suggested that he could bring me some instrumentation to detect this. And he promised, we'd take her down to the laboratory, the two ladies who were showing up, hand in hand, no doubt, boom, clinging to one another. Or maybe back to back, shoulder to shoulder, I don't know. But they were willing to show up, and he wanted to take them to the laboratory. And I said, no, forget laboratory. The layman out there reading this in the newspaper won't understand laboratory. What are you going to do? You malnitrate the crucibles and a cyclotron on her ear? Or what? No, I don't want to hear that. I equipped myself with a scientific device, and I went along. It was called a compass. Now, she's magnetic. The compass is going to go point right at her, right? I figured that if it's really magnetism, a compass is going to indicate it. So I have a simple piece of instrumentation, costs $1.50 someplace or other. Maybe I got it in a cornflake box, I don't know, but nonetheless, it's a scientific instrument, an easy way to do the thing instead of getting involved in $300,000 worth of equipment and all kinds of Dr. Frankenstein sort of procedures. So the two ladies showed up, and Sven de Gotha is standing aside, and he said, I'm going to let you have this. I'm just going to be an observer. But I told him in advance, I said, Professor, you've got to understand one thing. The claim is one thing. The actual realization of the thing, the event itself, will often be something totally different. It won't be half as entertaining or as amusing or true as the actual demonstration. You're late. Did you bring a note? Oh, no, you left before. That's okay, yes. Now, the two ladies showed up, and one lady literally did this. Told me through the interpreter, by the way, that this was something that she couldn't understand. Oh, it does get better, I swear. She took her wristwatch like this, and she said, how do you explain that? Well, I looked at both ladies, and they had very greasy, high, glossy makeup on. It was obviously pretty sticky, and a little bit of perspiration, too. And I said, well, I don't find it terribly difficult to explain. She said, well, we have no explanation for it. Second lady had even a better demonstration. She went in her purse and took out a small saucer, a little decorative ceramic saucer about this big, and stuck it on her forehead. It stayed there. And how do you explain that? I said, wait a minute. Pulled it off her forehead. The first four people standing to my right. I said, I'm not going to select people. I just take the first four that are standing there. You, and you. Stay right where you are. Stuck it on the forehead. Okay? Took it off. Stuck it on this forehead. All four of them. All four of them, it stuck to their forehead very effectively. And I said, now, we're going to do some control conditions now. Get me some soap and water. Simple props, you see. No scientific instrumentation or anything like that. First of all, the compass failed miserably. It pointed to north. Obstinately. It refused to point it down. Well, maybe it was a faulty compass. We don't know. But I asked for soap and water, and I asked the first lady, I said, through the interpreter, of course, I would like to just wash your forehead to take off the makeup and any perspiration that might be there. And right away, she informed me that she had discovered that if she had washed her forehead, that it wouldn't work because water is absorbed into the skin, and water and electricity and magnetism don't mix, you see, and it's probably a short circuit in the forehead or something, I don't know. But she denied that that would be a satisfactory test, and the other lady decided it was time for both of them to leave, and they left. And I turned to Sven de Gotha and I said, now you've learned your first lesson, Professor. Never spin your wheels. Don't start to give theories on how it might work until you've seen that it's really probably much less than is claimed in the newspaper accounts. Now, folks, I can see how that account ended up in a newspaper. I'm sure those ladies didn't say to the newspaper reporters, a strong man can't pull it away from me. But a newspaper reporter, after all, is a human being. His story doesn't look all that great. Things cling to their bodies. Sounds all right to me, but How about with such tenacity that a strong man can't pull a moose? Now we got a story. Now we have a story. I'm going to tell you a few things about the media. Now that's hungry. We'll leave that for a moment. But I'll tell you about something that happened a few years ago. New York Daily News. On page 3. And page 3 is a very prominent place to put news. Headline on the front, picture, whatever. Page 3 is where the heavy news that they want to get to your attention, the sensational stuff, shows up. Or did in those days, and I assume still does. It said that, do you remember some years ago in Tenerife when the Pan Am plane there was wrecked, the collision, boom, lots of lives lost, a real major on-the-ground aircraft disaster in Tenerife. It announced that a student at Duke University had successfully, in great detail, described not only the accident in a prophecy that he made, a prediction, 24 hours in advance of the event, seemed quite remarkable, of course, and that he described even the number of people that would be killed, and he was short by just 2. And he described the islands, Canary Islands, the whole thing. Very accurate. And that got picked up by news services all over the place. It was featured on television programs. It was on every newscast for quite some time. It got into, of all things, Fate magazine, which is a magazine. It's sort of like the magazine version of the National Enquirer. So you can see how reputable that is. It got into all of the spooky magazines that people subscribe to in great quantities. More people subscribe to those than subscribe to scientific periodicals, I can assure you of that. It got into all of those as a genuine example of prophecy. And the director of the program in which this was involved at Duke University actually made a statement that, yes, he had a sealed envelope 24 hours before in his safe, in his office, that was not touched by this gentleman until after the episode had taken place. It was torn open at that time, and it had the prediction on it. Now, we take you into a different world altogether just for a moment so you'll understand something. We magicians know how to do this, and it's a trick. I won't go into all the details of it. You can imagine, I'm sure, some of them yourself. But the effect is exactly as described. A sealed, signed envelope, all glued, ribbons around it, wax seals, all things signed by everyone present, is put in a safe. It's later carefully opened up, and inside you either find a tape cassette with a recording on it saying that, or a sealed letter with all kinds of security on it, signed, maybe even notarized in some cases if you're really smart at it, and genuinely notarized as of the day before. And it has the prediction on it. A miracle of a semi-religious nature. No, it's a trick. And this thing has been done by magicians many times. Now let's go back to the article in the Daily News. First edition that came out in the afternoon had the story on page 3 and a box in the middle of it describing the mechanics of how it was locked up in the safe and the whole thing. And it had a final paragraph at the end of it that said, forgive me, I've forgotten the gentleman's name. Anyway, so-and-so, a student at Duke University who made the prediction, said, it's all part of the publicity for my magic show, which is happening tomorrow night. Don't take it seriously, period. The second and third editions of the Daily News had everything in there except that sentence. Because they found out, oh, that's a bummer. That's a letdown at the end. Wow. Better cut that sentence out. It takes all the story away. It's now what they call a non-story. Another example of it. Lived in Rumson, New Jersey for many years. Young fellow that lived a few doors down was sort of one of the local characters. Everybody knew about him. He did strange things like going out in rafts and little sailboats and everything. And he was sort of an adventurer. I thought he was a nice kid. I saw him occasionally passing by. We'd say hello and whatnot. One day, New York Times comes out, front page of the New York Times, a little box like this, map of the Bermuda Triangle with a Maltese cross on it. Rumson boy lost at sea in the Bermuda Triangle. I read this short article, continued over onto another page, another little short bit, said that he had taken off in his little sailboat, one-man sailboat, sailed into the Bermuda Triangle, and had a radio transmitter with him, hadn't been heard of since. Coast Guard is looking for him. I no sooner had finished doing this and had called some friends in New York and reported this to them, I went out to pick up the mail. Pardon me. Kid waved hello to me. Hi. It was the kid standing by my mailbox. He was perfectly all right. And he was back. I said, hey, you're in the New York Times this morning. He said, yeah, they picked me up late last night and they brought me in. They want me to take some observing time in the hospital. He said, but I feel perfectly all right. We had a bit of a storm there. I lost my radio overboard, and they finally picked me up very, very early this morning, around 2:30 in the morning, and they flew me in. It's perfectly all right. It never appeared in the New York Times or any other paper that I know of that the kid was found. It's still part of the mythology about the Bermuda Triangle. So far as we know from reading accounts that were published in newspapers, that kid is still someplace out on a sailboat in the Bermuda Triangle, or perhaps taken off to Mars or wherever they take these people. The second part of the story was not published. You've got to learn that newspaper editors and reporters are subject to the same kind of pressures that we all are. We want something successful. And that's a non-story. The first one is a story. The second one is a non-story. Oh, he wasn't lost at sea. Well, shucks. Now, sometimes a small thing. Oh, bless you. Thank you very much. Water. What are you doing to me? It says Gordon's right on it. You can see it's right behind it. You must learn, ladies and gentlemen, you cannot depend upon the media to always represent the facts as they actually are. That's not a great deal of news to you, but you must bear it in mind at all times. Be careful about accepting what appears in print. Don't let them say to you, they put it in the paper, it must be so. Or someone wrote a book on it, it must be so. Books are often published which before they actually reach the stands and are on sale have been completely refuted because they're based upon false information. And do they immediately withdraw them? Oh no. I'll give you a good example. There's a book called Learning to Use Extrasensory Perception. It's published by a man named Charles Tart, a respected psychologist at University of California at Davis. I heard Dr. Tart give a talk that was in Casper, Wyoming, as a matter of fact. I was there with some other folks that had been invited, especially to speak, and I heard Dr. Charles Tart, and I'm going to give you exactly what he said in so many words, and I'm going to see if you have the same reaction to it. I recorded it on tape, still have a copy of the tape, so I know exactly the words he said. It's not a case of interpretation or faulty recollection. He said, in speaking to the audience, there was a time years ago when I was highly skeptical of any paranormal claims of any kind. He said, one of the things that convinced me that there must be something to this is a strange experience that I personally went through. He said it was wartime. I was at Berkeley, California, and everybody was working overtime. We worked till very late hours of the night, and a young lady who was my assistant at the time worked with me until very late this one night. She finally went home. I went home. And then the very next day, she came in all excited, and she reported this event to me. Now, it was wartime. They did work overtime. They often were very, very tired when they went home, and it was understandable they would fall into a deep sleep and get as much sleep as they possibly could during the night. She reported that during the night, something like 3:30 in the morning, that she had suddenly sat bolt upright in her bed, convinced that something terrible had happened. It was one of those things where I know something dreadful has happened, but I don't know what it is. I had a terrible sense of foreboding, she said. I immediately swung out of bed, went over to the window, looked outside to see if I could see anything that might have happened, like an accident or anything. She said, I was just turning away from the window, and suddenly the window shook violently. The glass in the window shook violently. And I couldn't understand that. Went back to bed, woke up the next morning, listened to the radio. A munitions ship at a place called Port Chicago had exploded. It's a famous explosion in the history of the shipping industry and in wartime history. It was loaded with munitions. It had exploded, and it literally took Port Chicago off the map. Port Chicago is no longer on the map. It leveled out the entire town, and over 300 people were killed. It was a major disaster at the time. An accident or sabotage, no one ever found out or decided. A major event. And she said that she had sensed the moment when all of these people were snuffed out in this mighty explosion. Because how would she have suddenly become terrified, jumped out of bed, gone to the window and such, and then, from 35 miles away, the shock wave had reached the town and shook the window. And indeed, she remembers looking at the clock to see what time it was, bang on, right to the minute. Well, when I heard this, I'm saying to myself, something wrong here. I see a couple of smiles around the audience. Maybe you've spotted the same thing that I did too. I had a geologist friend sitting 3 or 4 seats away from Casper, Wyoming. I handed him a little note. He looked at me, winked, smiled, got up, and left the room. Came back in again, handed it to me, and it just said on it, 8 seconds. What question did I ask him? Let's see some volunteers. Yes, sir. Man in the beard back here.
How long would it take the shockwave to go from Port Chicago to where she was at?
Not quite.
Through the ground.
Okay. The question was, what is the difference in time of propagation over a period, a distance of 35 miles of a shock wave through the air compared to a shock wave through the ground? 8 seconds. So 8 seconds before that window shook, she had been startled by the room itself shaking, not the airwave now, the shock wave, and that area is all solid rock, all the way up to where Port Chicago used to be. She had been disturbed by the ground wave. My theory is this, at least. The ground wave, which shook the bed, startled her. She swung out of bed, went over to the window, looked outside, didn't see anything, went to turn away from the window, and suddenly the pane shook in front of her. The next morning, and this is the proof of it, I went to Professor Tart, where he was having breakfast all by himself, went over. I had known him through correspondence and phone conversations, but never met him personally. I went over, introduced myself, sat down for a moment, and I gave him this bit of a theory. I said there would be 8 seconds difference in the time. He didn't look up much from his scrambled eggs. And finally, when he did, he looked up with a smile and he said, well, Mr. Randi, that may be the explanation that you prefer. Okay, I get somewhat of the same reaction. I think that he had just decided that he wasn't going to entertain that idea very solidly, but I don't know that he ever made that statement subsequent to that, so maybe he did come to the conclusion that what I offered as an explanation was more likely to be true. But it is so typical of the field. Again, I'm involved in some stuff, again, that I can't tell you about, and I apologize for that, where I have a number of prominent scientists who are absolutely ignoring, refusing to look at very good evidence in this case that I'm investigating. They can come up with rationalizations for it that you wouldn't believe unless you've been through this process before. It is incredible how they can ignore good evidence to show that there is a prosaic and very probable explanation for what they are observing. I said I would tell you about something else happening in Europe, in Germany this time, and it's a perfect example of just that. I'll take you back to 1903 in France. You may have heard of this. I assume that most of you have. If not, it's something you really should look up. A prominent scientist, a physicist named René Blondlot, very well respected, a man who had won many prizes in science, and justifiably so. He was doing, in that day, experiments which today are very simple, such things as discovering the speed of electricity in a conductor. Sounds pretty easy today, but in those days, a very sophisticated experiment, and not all that easily done. And he was very highly accurate in his work. He was in his 70s at the time. He discovered N-rays. They were named after the town of Nancy, and the University of Nancy was where he made his home. He was professor of physics there, head of department. Very highly respected, as I say. What were N-rays? Well, he had discovered, and I won't get into the whole story, it's very involved, but briefly, this is the general quality and characteristic of N-rays. N-rays were emitted by all substances with the exception of green wood, that is wood that hadn't been dried out, and anesthetized metal. What? What do you say? What do you say? What do you say, Ruth? I don't know. Anesthetized metal. That is metal that had been dipped in ether or chloroform for several hours after it would not give out N-rays. Right. Yeah, scientists all over the world were singing that little song even though it hadn't been written in. Sounded strange. It didn't sound as it was likely to be true. Within a matter of 6 or 8 months after the announcement of his discovery of N-rays, 30 papers had come in from all over the world verifying not only that N-rays existed, but increasing the spectrum. Now, I have to go to the board and illustrate for you the simple process. It's not a science lesson. It's hardly that boring, but we'll see what we can do. What he had was a thing which looks essentially like the classic spectroscope, which I'm badly illustrating right here. You had a prism in here, and you had down here a reticule, a screen across which you could pass a luminous thread that was in this direction. That would luminous thread with a vernier attachment. Very carefully you could move the luminous thread across this area. This prism is not glass. This prism is made of aluminium or aluminum, depending on what country you're from. And this is the slot here. It's a slot going in this direction. And here you have the substance or object which is giving out N-rays. Well, what happens is the N-rays are impinging on here like this in all directions. And this stream of N-rays is going down here like this, a narrow stream of them, and being refracted by the prism and coming out here like that, and producing a spectrum very much as spectrum of light would if that were a light source over there, and you would see the colors spread out. Well, by advent, now the problem was that N-rays were totally invisible, couldn't be detected by any device except this, and that the N-rays couldn't be viewed except when they hit a luminous thread, a thread that is treated with luminous substance, like calcium sulfide, luminous calcium sulfide, something like that. And they prepared this thread and, as I say, moved it carefully with a vernier attachment across the gap. And it had broken up into lines, very much like you see lines of like sodium lines, neon lines, whatever, for various elements. Well, they had this scale here. I don't know, I've forgotten it was in millimeters, but perhaps it was 30 millimeters in width. And they sat there very carefully in a dark room. They had to stay for at least 2 to 4 hours in a dark room with just a couple of little red lights going in order to acclimatize themselves to the dark, because otherwise their eyes wouldn't be sensitive enough. And they would slowly take the vernier attachment here, and they would turn it very slowly, and they would call off and write down on a pad where they got the luminous thread to increase slightly in brightness, and sometimes very much more in brightness. They would report the very strong line at 1.35 millimeters, for example, and they'd develop a spectrum of lines. The papers that were coming in were not only developing the same lines, but additional lines that were discovered by various researchers in the field. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Well, now, I must observe to you that 2 to 4 hours, I know the French pretty well. Hey, I'm part French. So I know the French very well, and I spent a lot of time there. I know the French academic system. The French academic system, first of all, says that the guy in charge of the laboratory knows everything, and anything he says goes. If you are underneath him, as far as your rank goes, you just don't offer him any kind of correction. He's not used to being corrected. He'll be corrected by somebody above him. Nobel Prize winners are at the very, very top of that list, of course. They can declare that 11 is the sum of 3 and 2, and everyone will believe them immediately because they are Nobel Prize winners. Funny, I could have sworn that 3 and 2 makes 5, but he says 11, so I got to go along with it. It's almost that bad, friends. With this particular experiment, since it was being validated, verified, repeated, replicated all across the world by various laboratories, the thing was essentially established. Well, Blondelot himself was very good at this process, even at his advanced age when he stayed in the room. But listen, the French cannot stay in a closed, dark room for very long without a little refreshment. And since fine French wines are easily available to them, and probably included in the budget for the experiment, I wouldn't be surprised, I have a sneaking suspicion that perhaps a little bit too much in the form of summer coolers was offered for refreshment. And some of the lines, incidentally, were doubled from time to time. That may be the explanation for it. Nonetheless, these papers of replication come in. Nature magazine in Britain, probably the leading scientific journal, generally speaking, around the world, and very, very highly respected, doubted this. Oh, by the way, the papers that came in from all over the world, some from America, even some from Canada, all European countries except England and Germany. Germany had just discovered Röntgen rays, that is X-rays, as we call them, a few years before that, and the French were a little annoyed, frankly. They didn't have a ray. They said, the Germans have got a ray. Sacré bleu, nom de cochon, all those things that the French say. And this goes along with it, but it's absolutely necessary. They were very annoyed at that, so they set Blondelot a job of finding a French ray, and he immediately did, and they called them N-rays, you see. Okay, now they got a ray, everybody's happy, papers are coming and replicating the thing, but nature didn't believe it. So they sent a man named Donald Wood. Wood was a very famous American physicist who had won all kinds of honors in the field, and they sent him in there to investigate. He went into the laboratory, was welcomed, sat around in the dark with the red lights and everything. And now, I've been accused of all kinds of subterfuge in laboratories and everything, and I plead guilty to some of it, at least. But it was always done with a good purpose in mind. It was done because it had to be done in order to prove certain points. The Alpha Project, which you may know about, was one result of one of those bits of skullduggery, and it did prove the point, and it was the only way to prove the point, and Wood recognized that back in 1903. What he did was walk over to this machine when no one was looking. They were probably pouring again, I don't know, and he removed the prism from its little clip and put it in his pocket. Now, without the prism, that aluminum prism, aluminum, by the way, is the only substance that would refract N-rays. That's another thing I forgot to mention. And he removed the aluminum prism, put it in his pocket. Without that prism, the machine could not possibly have worked. And yet, when Blondelot's assistant sat down over here and started to advance the vernier, lo and behold, he was finding the lines exactly where they should be. He swore they were there. Well, the experiment was over, and as far as Wood was concerned, it was really over because he knew that this was strictly imagination. They were seeing something in a dark room that wasn't there at all. So he was prepared to make his report. They were about to break the whole thing down, And he thought, well, I better put the prism back. So he went in his pocket, opened up the top, put it back in place, and one of Blanlot's assistants across the room caught him in the action, but unfortunately for him, thought that he was now removing the prism when actually he was putting it back, and he decided that he would prove the case. He stepped over, sat down in the chair, and said, I'll show you how I can do it. Twist, twist, twist. Mon Dieu, there is no line in this place. I can't find. He could not find any lines. There were no lines there. And he said, something is wrong. And he grandly opened the top of it, and to his horror saw that the prism was there. He thought it wasn't there. The whole thing hit the fan, as they say in the trade. Papers stopped coming in. Some papers already on their way for publication were suddenly withdrawn. The question is, folks, how did those 30 papers get written? Not because the scientists who wrote the papers were stupid, not because they were lying, but because they were deceiving themselves. Now let's go to modern-day Germany. Just before the big change, when East Germany suddenly vanished from the maps, I was there. I was there in Jena, and I spoke to the folks there, told them about E-rays. Now I'm going to confide something in you. They're actually called Erdstrahlen, Earth rays, but I've gotten the media now all over the world following my lead to call them E-rays, you see? It's sort of a parallel for N-rays. I'm telling the Germans they can be very proud now that they've never had any N-rays, but now they have E-rays, and they're even sillier than the French N-rays. So there's no corner on being silly. The Germans have fallen into it. Oh, what are E-rays? I haven't even told you. Oh, well, E-rays are marvelous, really. They cannot be detected by any known means. That is, with one exception, I lie. A man with a forked stick, a water dowser, can detect them, but it's the only means they know of to detect the E-rays. Their source is unknown. Their qualities are totally unknown, except that it's known they cause cancer. Now we have the cause of cancer. At long last, ladies and gentlemen, that great mystery is solved. E-rays cause cancer. And they come up from some unknown source deep in the earth. They don't wander around or anything. If you find a place where there's E-rays, it'll always come up from there. They don't know that they ever wander away. And the German government, just before East Germany vanished, this is the West German government now, not those silly communists, remember? The West German government spent 400,000 marks, at that time about $200,000, to pay dowsers with forked sticks to go around hospitals that were federally funded and federal office buildings to move beds and desks that were in the way of these deadly E-rays. There's some bureaucrats in Bonn operating out of their fireplaces because where the desk used to be is fraught with deadly earth rays that are coming up and going through their bodies and causing all kinds of terrible trouble. Now, hey, I got a simple question. I offered to go over there, not for 400,000 marks. I said, give me 4,000 marks just to pay for the expenses of it. I'll actually pay for my own ticket there, my hotel, and for coming back. You don't have to pay me anything. Just give me 4,000 marks to use for a budget, not 400,000. 1% of the original budget. And I think I can indicate something to you. What would my test be? Two-part test. Simply find out whether one dowser can find the same spot twice. And second, to find out if two dowsers can find the same spot once. That's it. It's that simple. Well, I tell them about this, and they say, we don't need to do that. Why not? Because we know dowsing works. It goes all the way back into medieval times. It's illustrated in books. It's been established in 1300. There were some experiments done here in France, and it's been proven that it can find ore. What they did is they said, where's the ore? And he said, right there. And they dug, and they found the ore. Ah, that's all we need. Of course, they could have dug over there and found it too, and over there. You see, I always challenge the dowsers, since there's 94% of the Earth's surface has water within drillable distance, so it's pretty hard to find places that don't have it. My challenge is find a dry spot. They don't want to do it. They consistently refuse to find a dry spot. Why? I have an idea, because they've only got about a 6% chance of success. I think that's exactly the reason. But I don't think that they quite recognize that, because dowsing is one of the idiomotor reactions which is very deceptive. You can have that dowsing stick work when you're told it should do this, it does it. It's an unconscious motor reaction, because when you're holding a stick like this that's bent out in this fashion, the slightest twitch of either wrist or the movement of the wrist this way or that way, up or down, any movement of the wrist will cause that stick to either thrash down or up. And in some of the tests I've done, it's come up and hit them right between the eyes and broken their glasses in some cases. A violent movement because it's a thing that's in poor equilibrium. There's a lot of strain to keep it parallel, and the stick is doing this, and it looks very mysterious. You'd think there was a force of some kind working on it. Well, the force is because they're doing this with it, and it doesn't want to be like that. It wants to be down or it wants to be up. And it is an unconscious ideomotor reaction, which is very, very powerful. Now, I have one more thing to tell you about my trip to Europe. This goes back a little further than the last trip. It involves this substance that was so kindly brought to me by Ellie here. This is called water. And you may not know it, water has memory. Did you know that? Yes. Tell me something. A man named Jacques Benveniste did some tests over there that were published in Nature magazine with the provision in the middle of the article that they published it only because he had agreed that an independent team sponsored by Nature and paid for by Nature would go in there and see how his tests were being done. We did indeed, and we showed there were serious problems with the protocol, and he's still arguing it to this very day. The theory of homeopathy. I will share this with you. I won't go into, again, the whole thing. It's very involved. These things are never simple. You know, it's not like gravity. Things fall down. No. It's always much more complicated than that. There are about 4 premises of homeopathy I will share with you. First of all, you go back 220 years to Samuel Hahnemann in Switzerland. Think of the social system of the day and the social situation. Medicine was in its infancy. It was barely started. They were barely away from Paracelsus, who made the wonderful discovery that you could use as medication non-organic substances. Up until then, pretty well, everything had been organic substances. He was using metallic salts, simple salts, mercuric chloride, lead acetate, things like that. He was treating the patients with these substances. It cured the disease very effectively. Unfortunately, the patients all died. So they had the best-looking corpses in the hospital. But they had clear complexions, no symptoms whatsoever, and they made beautiful corpses. Now, Paracelsus, actually, you've got to admire him. He's one of the heroes of medicine because he was brave. He was a self-centered, arrogant idiot. But other than that, he was okay. As a scientist, he really did do some thinking about it, and he was experimenting. Of course, he was experimenting on human beings that weren't in his family, but nonetheless, he was experimenting. And he did discover some very useful things and started people out on a new way of studying medicine. But in those days, back 220 years ago, all over Europe, all over the civilized world, indeed, more patients were dying under the hands of the doctors than were dying without the doctors. Poor people couldn't afford doctors, and self-terminating diseases, things that they could recover from, that their immune system or natural processes would eventually bring to a close, either by death or from recovery, were taking place naturally, while the doctors were bleeding people and doing pretty ridiculous things with their bodies and giving them a lot of poisonous compounds as well, which, although they were poisonous, in some cases in small doses, seemed to have been effective. So it was encouraging. But think what happens now when this man Hahnemann comes along with a wonderful theory that you don't have to give noxious substances to people, that ordinary water will do the job. Those people are effectively going to be receiving no treatment whatsoever, and they are going to join the group that is going to have a higher survival rate, people who don't go to doctors at all. The theory was this. It's a theory of sort of sympathies and likes curing like. The idea is that this is the way they did their studies. They would take a healthy patient. That's a bit of terminology I can't quite define, but a patient who looked healthy, they bring him in, they say, okay, I want you to swallow this. And they'd give him something like extract of dandelion or extract of sand or extract of, well, they'll say extract of dandelion. That's a little less hard to choke down. So they give him that, and he develops symptoms. We'll say the symptoms are A, B, and C, and those symptoms are breaking out in a red rash all over your body, shaking violently like that, and fainting every 20 minutes. Those are pretty serious symptoms, you see. Suppose those are the 3 symptoms. He writes that down in his book. When they take the dandelion extract, they get these symptoms. A healthy person, that is. So then he waits, and he waits and waits and waits, and finally a patient comes in among many patients and says, Doctor, I got a problem. There are 3 symptoms. What are your symptoms? Well, every 20 minutes or so I fall down on the floor. Wait a minute, got that in my book someplace here. You ever suffer from red rash? Yeah, I'm in a red rash all over my body. Oh, good. I know there was one here someplace in the experimentation. And they describe as symptoms A, B, and C. And he says, Eureka, le voilà, we have a solution for you. Your going to be cured by extract of dandelion. But wait a minute, second rule of homeopathy. You don't really give them the dandelion. What you do is you give them what they call diluted or attenuated solution of the dandelion. Now I mean attenuated, folks. They use terms like attenuated, and they use terms like, there's my chalk. They use terms like attenuated and diluted. Now, in order to be diluted, you got to have, not diluted, diluted. Diluted is easy, but diluted, you got to have a solvent and you got to have a solute. The solvent is the liquid or whatever, or the larger amount of substance, and the solute is what's dissolved in it. Okay, if you don't have one of those elements, you haven't got a solution. You got only a solvent or a solute. Well, they have attenuations of various degrees. Now, I'm not going to trouble you with powers of 10 and all that sort of thing, but if they take one part of the substance and put it in 10 parts of water and shake it up, it's called successing, not shaking up. They got to have a technical term for it. A certain way it's got to be shaken. And then what you've got is called a one solution, okay? That's called a one solution. If you take one part of that and put it in 10 parts of water, it's 1 part in 100 now, that's called a two solution. So it's directly related to the number of zeros on the amount of water, the comparative amount of water. So if you have a 5 solution, it's 5 zeros after the 1 and 1 part of substance in that. Now, as soon as you get up around 23, 24, 27 and such, depending on the substance, you get to what they call Avogadro's limit. This guy Avogadro was a troublemaker way back when, and he came up with this limit which says that there's only, at that point, for that particular substance, there's a chance in the solution you now have of there being one molecule of that substance present. If you do it again, you got one more order, one more dilution, there's one chance in 10 of there being one molecule of the substance in this liter or whatever of water. Well, folks, the homeopathy people start off at a dilution of 10 to the 50th, generally speaking. There are 10 to the 23rd stars in the universe. That's what I call dilute. Oh, but you ain't heard dilute yet. They go all the way up to 10 to the power of 1,500. That's extremely dilute. Now look at what that means. I called my friend Martin Gardner and said, Martin, I really need something for the layman. I don't know what 10 to the 1,500th is. It's a huge number, very, very, very large number, but how do I illustrate that? He said, I'll call you back. Later on the day, he called me back. He said, okay, got a pencil ready? I said, yep. He paused for a minute. He said, now I'm going to call you back. He said, this can't possibly be right. It's ridiculous. 20 minutes later, he called me back. He said, no, I was right first time. He said, it's equivalent to, I hope you're ready for this. I haven't told you the fourth quality of homeopathy. Oh, but the third one is, by the way, the more dilute the medicine is, the more powerful it is. So as you get up to 1,500, it's getting more and more powerful. It works the other way. We might think it would work the opposite way, but apparently not. And the fourth rule, you still haven't heard. Wait till you hear that. That's a doozy. Martin said if you take 1 grain of rice, crush it up in a teaspoon, you then dissolve that powder in a sphere of water the size of the solar system, with the sun at the center and the orbit of Pluto at the outside. Then you repeat that process 2 billion times. Now there are naturally, as might have occurred to you, a couple of technical problems here. First of all, how are you going to mix it? Maybe you could do it just with a stick. Where the hell do you get the stick? And you have to mix it for billions and billions of years, as Carl would say. You have to stir it for a long time, and it's very difficult to mix it up, but nonetheless, that's what it calls for to get that kind of dilution. Now for the fourth rule of homeopathy. Every molecule of water which you have so prepared, when it comes in contact with any other molecule of water, immediately passes on its quality to all of that water. I have a question. Now, I'm only a layman, but boy, I got terrible questions to ask these people. And I've asked them this, and they say it's a non-significant question, and they refuse to address it. Since water has been around for billions and billions of years, all of what I've got in this little cup of water here, a lot of that's been around for billions and billions of years. And in its process, it must have come upon contact with other molecules that have been in contact with lots of other molecules, which have been in contact with each and every possible organic and inorganic substance available on planet Earth. And since the more dilute it is, the more powerful it is, feel much better. What's wrong with that question? Why don't you give them ordinary tap water then? No, they'll give them extract of cadmium or something like that, which, don't fear, it has no cadmium in it. It's the purest water you're ever going to drink. There's no way, and they admit, there is no way of telling the cadmium attenuated solution, ho-ho, with the lead attenuated solution, with the gold attenuated solution, and they even have substances like sulfur and sand, quartz, ordinary quartz, which doesn't dissolve in water to any appreciable extent at all. You shake 1 part of quartz with 10 parts of water, try to detect the quartz, friends. I ask you, by the most sensitive of tests, but they say it works. Oh, really? Does it really work? Well, the people report it works. What about the people who die? Well, I didn't hear from them. I can give you one good test of it. One test that's been going on for 200 years. The royal family in England uses it. Look at Prince Charles. You don't know this guy. He believes in Uri Geller, spoon bending, the whole thing, UFOs. He recently said that he hopes that the British Medical Association, he's their president. Ooh. Can you imagine? He's their president. He hopes they'll return to the precepts of Paracelsus. Get ready for a dose of lead acetate in your next aspirin then, if that's the case. Come on, Prince Charles. Wake up a little bit. Get into a modern world. Let's get real. I've been saying this to a lot of people for a long time. Let's get real. Why do I have to go around the world lecturing, telling people things they should already know? But that's my business. That's the peculiar business that I'm in. And I shouldn't have to be in that business. And you shouldn't have to come here to have me tell you things that you either already know, strongly suspect, or should know if you looked into it a bit. Is this sound working now? Do we know? Who knows? It's Blown Low designed this set, I think. We're trying to get the sound working on here, and I don't think we have had much of a success. Let's see, Michael, if we can get it going, because I would like to show these folks another example of rather silly stuff. What this is something that I did on the Carson show some time ago. Remember the Carson show? Yes, well, he's still with us, but not for very long. What a dreadful moment that's going to be. What will I do after 11:30? Well, I went to the Carson show, and I gave them a demonstration of what's known as psychic surgery. That's what we've got lined up on the set for you here, but we have to get sound because the sound effects are best part of the whole thing. Okay, let's forget it. I'm sorry. And I want the audio man flayed tomorrow morning. And I want to be present. Psychically. Yes, psychically. Yes, that'll do it. Even more painful. Okay, I have a couple of demonstrations that I would like to do for you, because if I don't do a couple of demonstrations, many of you folks are going to say, gee, I wouldn't be fooled by that kind of stuff. Stand back, friends. This is an invention of mine, and it's something I'm sort of proud of. I've been showing it to magicians all over the world and making them crazy. These are the ESP cards. Would you hold that for me, young man? Thank you very much. These are the 5 ESP symbols that are used in so-called ESP work or tests and whatnot. They were designed by a man named Zener many years ago, Swiss chap, and he chose these symbols to be as different from one another as possibly could in emotional content and getting dirty, whatnot. These are the 5 different symbols. I'm going to give them to this good-looking chap right here. Would you hold those for me, please? All right, hold them face down, if you would, and mix them up thoroughly by shuffling them. I'm turned away from you, so I can't see them, so that you don't know which cards are which. As soon as you're satisfied with that, tell me. Ready. Okay, you got them shuffled up face down now. I don't know which ones are which, and I'm not looking anywhere near you because there is a vague possibility that somehow I may be able to detect it. So I've got a couple of envelopes I notice here. Oh, hello there. Hi. What are you doing afterwards? And I have some black folders of some kind here. That one's got a little defect, but what the heck, so have I. I'm not supposed to be looking anywhere near. Would you take those from me, man, please? Mix them again, sir, just in case I caught a glimpse of the back of them or something. Now, these are the instructions. Very simple. I want you simply, sir, to select any 2 of those cards without looking at what they are, and then, again, not looking, place them face to face very quickly so that you won't be able to tell what they are, and don't look at the other 3, okay? Any two of them at random. The other three you can put under your seat or something like that. Give them to somebody. Maybe the lady will hold them under her purse or whatever, so that they aren't visible at all, the other three. You'll be left holding two in your hand that are face to face, and you do not know what they are. Of course I don't know, and no one in this audience, I assume, knows, unless there's a psychic here. In which case I'm prepared to pay. All right, now you'll have some black folders there. Just take any one of the black folders. They're simple black paper. There's nothing mysterious about them. And place the two cards inside the folder. So the folder's on either side of it, and you can't even see the backs now, correct? Okay. You have only two envelopes. I should have given you a whole selection, but take either one of the envelopes and place that combination, the folder, around the two cards, securely inside the envelope, and then seal the envelope, if you would, please. Okay. You're a very good worker. I do like your... The other three are out of sight now, are they? Yes. Okay, fine. Now, I'll take just by the corner like that, very delicately. You'll notice the showmanship that goes along with this. I don't need to do this, but the union sort of likes it. Now, I have, between my fingers here, a simple envelope. And, I can... do we have a black magic marker, something fat? I've got ordinary pens here, but... oh, we do. Look, hey, talk about a big magic. That's a magic marker, let me tell you. A Magnum 44, ladies and gentlemen. You notice we spare no expense whatsoever. Now, I presume it works. I am not only going to tell you, sir, though you won't know if I'm right until we open them up, not only going to tell you what the cards are that are inside here, but I'm also going to tell you on which side of the envelope they are. This, for convenience, because it's sensible, we'll call the back of the envelope. This we'll call the front of the envelope. Now, I have a hard time doing this because I have to have everybody in the audience concentrate with me. I want you all to... If you believe that, I have some swampland in Florida you might like to buy. I am going to make a guess that this will be the face of it, this will be the back. I'm going to make a guess that this one is the... Please don't laugh now, I'm working hard. I'm going to guess that this one is probably the plus. Whoops. Sit still. Now that's as permanent as you're going to get. I'm not going to be able to change my mind, right? And on the other side of the envelope, on this side facing towards me here, the back of the envelope, I'm going to make a guess that this is probably... I'm getting a trembling. I'm thinking of a hula dancer. I'm thinking of water, the ocean. It just came through to me. I'm thinking of the wavy lines, which are approximately like that. Now, this pen smells like a gas station. I want you to watch that in no time my fingers leave my hand. Out. Get out of there, you fool. There. Out come the... You can hold on to that for me. That's what we call a used envelope. But remember, the wavy lines should be on the top and the plus mark on the bottom. And if I'm wrong, I will promptly kill myself. And we find, by golly, they are exactly as represented. Thank you so much. I'll take the other cards. Where are the other cards? You haven't done this? Okay. Now, folks, chances of doing that are what, Arthur? 1 in 20 of getting them correct, and on the right side of the envelopes, too. If you want to go to the racetrack with me, I'll entertain ideas along that line, if you wish. And now, one miracle further of the semi-religious nature. This is, the Odyssey. That's, any nude pictures? Those Greeks, they ran around half-dressed and did terrible stuff. Anyway, here's the illustration. It's a Greek pot. That's a big help, sure. Now, Homer, the Odyssey. Let me see, who can we... This young man right here, would you... are you Greek, by any chance? You can still manage it. All right, okay, fine. Now, what I want you to do, sir, is just, hold the book always up like that. This man trying to look over your shoulder, so don't... would you sit back, please? Mind your business. I didn't ask you to do that. We haven't met before, have we? Now, you've never spoken to me before? Never. How do you know it's me? Okay. No, we're not in cahoots or anything like that, I promise you. Just open up the book any place at all, like flip through the pages and stop any place at all, and I won't even look to see whether you're stopped, okay? Hold the book right up like that so that I can't possibly see it if I should look towards you. You're at a page now? Okay. Now, where are the page numbers? I've forgotten. The top or the bottom? Bottom. The bottom. Okay. Look at that page number if you would, please. Now, naturally, if you're halfway through the book, like there may be 300 pages in there, the figure that should come to maybe 150 or something like that. Suppose the page number is 122 or something like that. I don't know what it is, and I'm not asking you to verify it or not. But if you add together the digits of the page number, like 1, 2, and 2 will be 5, right? So that'll give you a smaller number that we can handle more conveniently, all right? So just add together the digits of the page number to come upon a new number. Don't look over his shoulder, he's doing it. You got it, the new number now? Okay, whatever that number is, start at the top of the text, on the top of the page, wherever the text is, and count over that number of words, if you would, please. Just to yourself. And don't, pardon?
Number of words.
Yeah, the number, whatever the smaller number was you got. If it was 5, count over 5 words. Okay? That gives you a, okay, you got the word now?
Yes.
Close the book up, please. Now what you've done is you turn to any page, you just added together the digits of the page number, which will give you a smaller number to use, of course. Otherwise, if you're page 150, you have to count on 150 words. It would take you forever. We'd all be home by then. So whatever you got, if it was 5, you count over 5 words, and you looked at that word at that position, correct? Let me have the book if you would. I'll get the vibrations from it. Go to the book. Wonderful vibrations. I never pass up the vibrations. I'm going to step to the board here, and I'm going to, now I don't want you to tell me right or wrong. Don't try to correct me or anything like that. I won't even look towards you, because if I'm doing it right, you may go, ooh, like that. If I'm doing it wrong, you may go, you know. I'm not going to read from your expressions or anything, but you have the word firmly in mind. Okay. I'm so going to start to sketch now, and please, no. Place is coming down. Earthquake, earthquake. Doesn't make much sense. Here. It's an English word, is it? It's an English word, but it doesn't make much sense to me. Well, sorry, that's all I get from it. What was the word you actually looked at, please? Heart. Heart? Like heart? Oh, ladies and gentlemen, I got it upside down. That often happens. It really does very often happen. I'm very sorry. I apologize. But you were holding the book like this, you see, and I got the impression of it. And if you believe that's real, I have some swampland in Florida I'm selling immediately after the lecture. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been suggested to me that we take a 5-minute break to see if we can get this silly machine working here, at which time I will consume the rest of the homeopathic remedy here and probably feel much better as a result. But let us really make it 5 minutes. I now have exactly, 2 minutes before 4. At 3 minutes past 4, I will commence talking again. Okay, folks. We're back in session. And by the way, autographs and things like that, we have no more of the magic book left. They apparently have just evaporated. Sorry about that, but you can get that in your bookstores. Same price, only no autograph. If you want me to do David Copperfield, I also signed for David Copperfield. So, and Harry Houdini. What the hell, why not? Who knows? Okay, we have the tape working, hallelujah. And thank you very much, Michael. That's very good of you. Different view. Let's smash this machine, throw it downstairs. Yes. I'm going to show you that to start with then. Some of you folks, by the way, if you folks have to get up and leave, please don't feel that you're being rude or anything like that. Some people just have to, that's all. I'll stay here till the janitor throws us out, whatever. But don't feel that, passing through the crowd and leaving is rude or anything. It certainly isn't. I know that some folks have to leave. Now, I'm going to tell you briefly the history of this psychic surgery thing. It's been 35 years or so, and a little bit more, but 35 years that the active interest in psychic surgery, so-called, in the Philippines has been on. And this is a process whereby the so-called healers in the Philippines will reach into the body, apparently. It's actually done by, but it's been done by sleight of hand, and you'll see the procedure on the screen here. By the way, if you feel queasy at the sight of blood or anything like that, you just may not want to watch this. It is real blood. It is real guts and stuff, but it's not the blood and guts of the gentleman on the table. He was obtained from the lineup outside the Carson show. He was a volunteer. I needed somebody with a little bit of avoirdupois, and he suited the description exactly. He was there on his first honeymoon, first anniversary of this marriage, by the way. And as I said to Carson when we left the air, you don't see it on here, I said to him, John, he's got a problem. He said, what? I said, he's healed, but what is he going to do on his second anniversary? He's had his guts torn out on the Carson show. Well, what is it this year, honey? Over the barrel, in the barrel over the falls? What are you going to do? And if he doesn't come up with something equally good, that may endanger the marriage altogether. Okay, we're going to take a look at this tape, and I do a little bit of a gag in the middle of it in order to try to take the edge off it a little bit, because it's a pretty serious affair that you see taking place here. And we did have one lady in the green room had passed out, and when the audience got up to leave immediately after this, one lady stayed in her chair because she had swooned as well. So seriously, folks, if you feel a little queasy, or if you hear somebody beside you going, ah, that's the noise they make when they swoon at the sight of this. Don't let them slide on the floor. It has happened at some audiences. And I make the little joke to sort of take the edge of it. How do you do play? You got your finger on the button? Press the button, and away we go.
A little word of warning here. If you have a queasy stomach, the sight of blood bothers you, we suggest you don't watch this. This is James Randi, who's going to give you an idea of what the psychic surgeons in the Philippines actually do on people who go down there and pay good money. You all set?
Indeed.
All right, we have our patient. It's all yours.
Okay. Now, this is the time to look away if you need to, because it's going to get a little gory from now on. The psychic surgeons of the Philippines are, how you feeling, Sandy, okay?
Everything's fine.
They're pretty heartless folks. They just don't much care for the feelings of people. They don't certainly care for their health at all. And of course, they're not in any way trained to do this sort of thing. They just put on an act as if they are trained. Now, what you're about to see is a bare-handed operation which appears to take place by actually penetrating the body. Believe me, what you're seeing is strictly special effects. It's sleight of hand and nothing more. And this is the way it looks. Anything that gets down there, we don't get it on your trousers if we can help it. Let me see. This is terrible. It's getting worse and worse. Wait a second now. Oh, no, that doesn't come out. A bonus. That's a bit better. Just a second. Just 1 second now.
It may be better for you.
You don't feel any better? And the strange thing is, after this operation is all over, now mind you folks, I want you to bear in mind, please, that people are showing this as if it were really serious, as if it actually did take place, and as if surgery were really performed. People do this, they go to the Philippines, they spend their money, and they frankly return home, in most cases, to die. It's little bit funny to watch it, perhaps, and you say, gee, I know it's play acting. It's not play acting when they go by the tens of thousands every year. Sanford, I want to thank you for being a wonderful volunteer. I think you deserve a round of applause for that. Thanks very much. Thank you. I'll get you putting away. Thank you so much.
Sanford, thank you. James Randi.
Thank you so much. Now, I had a gentleman visit me during the slight intermission there, and he brought me a rather badly deformed spoon here. He said that a lady had done this, and he saw it happen before his eyes, and that's quite likely. I'll give you a demonstration with that, and I also, where is it? I think I've got one in here someplace. Hello? Never does work. It's the microphone I'm carrying around with I have a fork embedded in my heart here. I obtained this at the Unitarian Church, but you don't have to worry, they're not really a church. I mean, it's not... No, they're not really religious. That's why I've affiliated myself with several of them over the years. My favorite Unitarian joke has now changed. This is what the minister at the church told me. He said, what do you get when you cross a Jehovah's Witness with a Unitarian? I said, I don't know. What do you get, Bob? And he says, you get somebody who knocks on your door for no apparent reason. The way I'd heard it originally was, you cross a Jehovah's Witness with an atheist, what do you get? Someone who knocks on your door for no reason whatsoever. But no apparent reason, I think, is much subtler. This is a silver fork, which, it's silver-plated, at least, says, Melody silver plate. Okay, now, right. This is a silver-plated fork, it says here, and I'm going to ask someone that looks innocent here. I'm in trouble. Yeah, you, sir. Would you just hold the fork like that by either end for me, up above your head, would you please? I like your work so far. Have you ever done this before? That's wonderful. I mean, really, you fell right into the part beautifully. I'm going to massage it very gently here, and you're going to see something rather remarkable happen. Now, watch this. You're holding it now? Look, it seems to be getting very limp. Look at that. See, it seems to be getting sort of rubbery. It's astonishing. I don't believe it. Look at that. And I'm only touching it very lightly, just one finger. Look, it seems to be getting all limp. Amazing. Don't hold it too tightly now, just by the very, very tips. That's it. Oh, look at this. It seems to be getting flexible. Let go of it for a second here. So everyone can see. I'll step way back here. Your gentleman's neck is falling off here. And I just hold it like this. Look, between your fingers, just shake it like this, and you'll see a remarkable thing happening. Oh, is there no end to the man's cleverness? Hold out your hand for me, if you would, please. Just like this. That's it. Very good. The clean one. That's all right. That's all right. And it seems to fall into two pieces. I don't know how it's done, and I don't care.